If you truly want to be successful, you have to truly want to be successful and put forth the time and effort it takes to build, the muscular foundation. You respect the fact that you may have to take a little bit more time before you can get on stage. We are individuals, but we're not islands. We can't get through anything that's difficult or anything that we want to pursue completely by ourselves. I don't think you'll ever be exactly where you want to be, but you have to find beauty in where you are. I think people underestimate the physiological impact of stress, and they think it's just a mental thing, but I think that large amount of stress that I placed on myself in past preps really held me back from unlocking my full potential this prep. So I told myself, I was like, we're not going to do that this time.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ice Cream for PRs podcast. My name is Jeff Nippard and I'm your host. And I've got my co-host Robin Gallant joining me this week.
Hi everybody.
And we also have a special guest, Emily Duncan, joining us. Emily is a nationally qualified NPC bikini competitor, sports nutrition specialist, certificate holder from the ISSN. She's a PE science athlete. I think I'm saying that right. It's either PED science or PE science.
Everybody always says PED science. I'm like, that's not it.
Okay, good. I'm glad I got it right. And Emily's going to be joining us today for a conversation about contest prep, psychology, and mentality, and other lifestyle considerations for the contest prepping athlete. And we're going to take a specific focus on the bikini division because I feel as though that's something that has been a little bit overlooked in the history of this podcast, especially since Robin went on a little hiatus. So that's going to be the focus of the conversation. So Emily, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, absolutely. No, thank you guys for having me. I've been listening to this podcast since before we were even friends. So I've kind of low-key fangirled / peed my pants a little bit, thinking about being on an episode. And I do think it's really awesome that I feel very honored to be able to speak about bikini, because I think not just on your podcast, but in fitness in general, especially when people are talking about more in-depth matters, bikini gets left out of the conversation a lot. And I think that if we want to improve bodybuilding as a whole, but especially the bikini division, then there just needs to be more conversation about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Thank you.
Pleasure is all ours. We've been wanting to do this for a while now, so I'm glad we're finally getting the chance to do it.
Yeah.
So Emily, the first thing I want to talk about is just your most recent season, competitive season.
Of course.
I know you did a string of shows, and I follow you on your Instagram and YouTube, and I just think that your progress throughout the last year has just been really inspiring for me.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Very impressive, how you've managed to have such a successful competitive season. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so this past season, I ended up doing 4 shows. I started out with the Arnold Sports Festival, the amateur show, in March. I prepped for 20 weeks for that show. I ended up placing, that was an international show, so it wasn't just limited to the United States. It was actually sanctioned by the IFBB and not the NPC. And I placed second in my height class. I am in the F class for bikini because I am very tall. I'm 5'9", and that class is 5'7" and over. That show was a really, really cool show. Being an international show, there was an international judging panel, so I think there was only 1 or 2 judges from the United States itself. So earning, a top 5 placing where it's people from other countries that have literally no idea who you are, they've never seen you on a stage before, was extremely just gratifying to me. And it was also amazing to be able to compete on the expo stage at the Arnold on Saturday for finals. That was insane. I think my favorite competitive memory of my career so far was stepping out on the stage at finals and just hearing people cheering, because there's tons of people at the Arnold. Obviously, it's a huge convention. So just seeing people that I knew in the audience and just the masses of people, that was a really cool experience. And obviously taking home second was a pretty cool experience as well. And then 8 weeks after the Arnold, I competed at a regional show, the Kentucky Derby. This one was actually more of a sentimental show for me. It was my 2-year anniversary show. It was the first show that I ever competed at. back in 2014. So I did that one a little bit more for sentimental reasons than anything, and it was close by to where I lived at the time. But at that show, I took home first in my height class, which was again F class. I took home first in my collegiate class, and then I won the collegiate overall title. So if you're not familiar with the NPC, there are some shows that have varying divisions. Open class is always there, but there's also divisions. Collegiate for you have to present a college ID or a copy of your transcripts. There's teen divisions, novice divisions, masters, yada yada yada. So I did take home first in my collegiate class, and I won the overall for that show. That one was also really, really cool to see because my coach, actually, Nick Tong, he competed at that show, and he took home a class win and the overall men's bodybuilding win. So that was an awesome just team experience overall. And then 3 weeks after that, I headed to Charleston, South Carolina for Junior USAs. Junior USAs is one of the pro qualifiers to move from the NPC to the IFBB. That was, I don't know if I already said this, that was 3 weeks after the Derby. I did end up winning my height class, so bikini F class at that show. However, this was a show where only the top 3 in the overall earned their pro cards. So I missed it in the overall, and I would say that this was the hardest show mentally for me, just coming so close to my pro card, especially, and I think I might have talked to Robin about this a touch, but coming from a class win, F class, I was the last class to go up on stage, going from that high of having a class win, not really getting like a moment to think about, wow, I just won my class, and then going for the overall and missing it. That was kind of a low. So coming out of that show was definitely mentally the toughest. And then Nick and I decided that if I had a shot to win my pro card, it would be at Junior Nationals 3 weeks after Junior USA. So Junior Nationals was another pro qualifier in Chicago, Illinois. Ooh, excuse me. And that was 3 weeks after Junior USA's. And so basically we were like I said, if I had a shot, it would be at this show. So we knew that I could physically do it. But I knew that I would feel a lot more at peace if I tried Junior Nationals. So I did approach that one a bit more from an emotional standpoint, but it ended up being the best I ever looked. And I did take home 4th place in my height class at that show. It was a bit larger, a bit more competitive than Junior USA. So still overall very, very happy with that season. It was a very successful season, very long season, but definitely my best season to date. So if you have any specific questions outside of like placings or anything of that nature, feel free to ask. I might have my notes jotted down here.
Sure. No, that's
incredible.
A lot of competing in 1 year.
Oh, thanks.
Super impressive.
See, and people always say it's a ton of shows, but I'm like, I'm not going to diet for like half a year and do one show.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the bang for my buck here, guys.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So are you done competing now?
Yes, for the year, yeah. I definitely welcomed growing season with open arms. After Junior Nationals, I was definitely ready to enter a more homeostatic place with food and dieting and everything. And I was like, and like I said, I felt at peace with how the season ended. So I was like, okay, we're done. It's time to get better.
Cool. So how are you approaching that post-show period? Like, you still look really lean to me, and like you're maintaining condition really well. So how is it you went about? So like, okay, first, how many weeks ago was your last show?
Junior Nationals was 2 weeks. If it was 2 weeks ago from this past Saturday, so just over 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So not too long ago at all.
Right. So how are you finding transitioning into that point now where if you wanted to eat more, you can, like you don't have any more shows on the immediate horizon? How have you found that psychologically?
Psychologically, this has been the easiest transition that I've had into an off season, simply because I definitely felt a little bit scrawny towards the end. Just, seeing myself day to day, and you probably deal with this when you get down, you're like, I don't even look like I lift. And just knowing how close I came to my pro card this season, setting myself up mentally for a growing period, which a lot of women struggle with. Instead, I took that as a time to be excited because I know that I'm building my pro physique now. Because next time I go on stage, I will be irrefutable. They won't be able to question me, but that wouldn't happen if I didn't take a long growing period to get better and to build more quality tissue instead of just perma-dieting. But I will say, just the past 2 weeks have been the hardest physical transition I've ever had into a growing period. I'm sleeping a ton. I think because I prepped for so long, my body became very used to prepping. And while there were still fluctuations throughout the period, where I was dieting, where food would come up and whatnot. Just the actual transition into, okay, we're growing now physically has been a lot harder. I've been very tired. Recovery has been a little bit, it's not the greatest, but it's starting to slowly get better. I think just transitioning out of that, there was a lot. I mean, peak week throws things off a little bit when you're manipulating sodium water, even just acutely. But all of those things compounded into one has definitely made it physically a bit more difficult. But mentally, it's been a great transition for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what I mostly want to talk about. But first, I'm just curious about how your prep went, because I haven't personally done a prep that long. I typically
Neither have I.
And then hit like 1 or 2 shows, right?
Right.
Just because of availability, like locally, more or less.
Right.
And I can't just travel around the States all year. Being from Canada, I'm kind of limited in what I can do. But so did you diet, say, for that first 20-week prep, get ready, and then start a reverse diet, or did you keep dieting the whole way through? Like, how long were you in a deficit for?
We started at 20 weeks out from the Arnold, and I definitely did not plan on dieting for, 36 weeks by the end of it. But so we dieted for 20 weeks for the Arnold. We got most of the work done before the Arnold, so we really fell into my groove. I would say I started prep mid-October. I think we really fell into, my fat loss groove right around January, which was a little bit unsettling for me being, 8 weeks out from a show. I was like, I should probably look a little bit better. But, that's when we found the dieting style and the cardio protocol that really, really worked for me. Like I said, we got most of the work done before the Arnold. Because there was such a long time period between the Arnold and the Kentucky show, there was an 8-week time period in between. We did bring food up, bring cardio down. And, that would happen over the course of even the 20 weeks leading up to the Arnold. Nick was very dynamic with how my prep went. He's very attentive to, when I need to be fed, when I need a little bit of relaxation time, when I need to be reversed, when I need to push harder, things of that nature. So he is very attentive to those cues, that biofeedback that I give him. So it wasn't just 36 weeks of diet, cardio. There was a lot of ebb and flow. There was kind of a wave-like progression. So right after the Derby, we did bring food up considerably given the time frame. I was allowed to, just chill out a little bit. And then after the Derby going into Junior USAs, there were only 3 weeks in between, but still things did come up a little bit in between. Not, a full-on like we did with the Derby, but yeah, food came up a bit there. And then same thing with Junior Nationals. And that would happen, I guess I should clarify. So after Junior USAs, there were 3 weeks after was Junior Nationals. So for about probably, and this isn't really time to let anything hormonally come back into balance, but about, half a week to a week right after the show, things would come up a little bit. Just more for, I think, mental restoration than anything. There's not a whole lot you can do physically at that point, but I think that helped keep me mentally in check as well. So I think there were very intelligently planned reverse diet periods and, cardio reductions throughout the course of prep. So yeah, like I said, it wasn't just 36 weeks of hardcore dieting, because that I would have been dead.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
So I guess, a lot of people end up getting to a point where they just feel like a zombie all the time during prep. And then that's usually the point where people are like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm just going to end it right here. So how often did you feel like that throughout the prep? And what was it that pushed you to keep going and push past that if you did feel like it?
It was actually it was wild to me, because I have definitely had that, dieted feeling, we call it. I've had that where you hit that fog brain at that certain point in the day where your mood is crap, where your energy is crap, where your strength is crap, all of those things. And this prep, even though it was the longest prep I've had, and I would say definitely the most aggressive dietarily, I would say that that's the least prepped I've ever felt in the 4 preps that I've done, which was wild. And Robin said in LA, she's like, you're the happiest prepping person I've ever seen.
She's actually crazy all the time. Yeah. She just has full, I was more sloth than she was, and I was eating 5 times as fast. No, but she has so much energy, and I don't know, it was really cool. It was really inspiring for me to see how she did things in person. And that's when I came home, I told Jeff, I was like, oh my god, I don't know how Emily does it. We need to interview her. So I think that's kind of what inspired this podcast. But yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But there's definitely times when things don't feel the greatest. And that's just a reality of prep, you know. And I have so many notes on this, how I get through things. So one thing that's been really big, and actually I found out about this app through, it was either one of your YouTube videos, Jeff, or one of your podcasts, I don't recall, but just mindfulness meditation. I downloaded the Calm app long time ago after hearing about it in one of your videos. So I definitely utilized that literally on the daily. I force myself to do it. So just taking those mindfulness and meditation breaks, I think, and you both can attest to this, competing in any fashion is largely a mental battle. So the more that you can master where your head is at going into things, the better off you're going to be. And I knew going into this prep that it was going to be harder than I had ever had to prep before, because the caliber that I was trying to compete at was far different than I had ever competed at before. Another thing that was huge, and again, you made a video about this in your Mentality of a Pro video, I was less emotional regarding prep. So in the past, especially the prep that I had before this one, I was very, very emotional regarding my diet, regarding my training, et cetera, et cetera. So I would let bad training days really take a toll on me mentally. Like, I had lifts where I would straight up just break down and sob throughout the whole thing. And that just, I think people underestimate the physiological impact of stress. And they think it's just a mental thing, but I think that large amount of stress that I placed on myself in past preps really held me back from unlocking my full potential this prep. So I told myself, I was like, we're not going to do that this time. And you have to accept, sometimes you feel 50 shades of shitty during a prep, and that's a reality, and you can't really do anything about that. It just happens. So you can't get emotional about it. And I think that's especially hard for females, because we tend to be more emotional than men are.
Females and Jeff.
And Jeff. So, you know, going into workouts where I didn't necessarily feel 100%, it's one of those things where you just have to take it rep by rep and set by set, and, you know, step by step if you're on, you know, stairs or whatever. But I think another thing that was really, really big was the coaching aspect. So this was the first prep that I'd ever had with Nick. And I think he helped me to be much more objective and not subjective. So he helped me remove my emotion from things a lot, which ended up making me better. And I tend to have the urge to try and micromanage everything, including past preps. So I would always question what coaches that I had previously were doing, like, oh, is this really right? Oh, is this what I should be doing? Yada, yada, yada. But with Nick, he makes it, like, I trust him. I trust him immensely. And that's why, you know, it's important to have a good coach that you trust, so I don't feel the need to question him, but he's also very direct, and you don't question him. Obviously, if something was, you know, a huge red flag, he's not the type to say don't ask questions, but he's very good at making objective calls. So I didn't have that mental block of, am I really doing what I should be doing?
It's almost like another layer of like a burden added to your prep to constantly feel like you're the backseat driver in the coaching experience.
Oh my God.
And it's just like mentally taxing. So like I've heard you say before that like you're the athlete and that's your job. So you listen to your coach and you perform and yeah, so.
Right. You have to do, and this is a thing that, you know, Nick helped make a little bit mentally easier on me, and I carried this mantra throughout my prep. You know, I am controlling my variables, and so I can't get upset. You know, I'm hitting my macros. You know, I'm hitting my training. I'm doing the cardio that I need to do. I'm doing everything that's within my control. Some things physiologically we can't control, we can't understand, we don't know exactly what's happening. But as a competitor and as an athlete, if you're doing everything that you can, you're truly giving everything that you're doing, you know, 100% minimum effort every day, then you have to find peace in that, and you have to find satisfaction in that, and not be overly critical on yourself or on your coach, and you just have to kind of let things happen as they happen. But in terms of like hating prep or hating training, this prep, I never was one of those people that, you know, dreaded going to the gym. But in terms of when things were a little bit more struggle bus like, I mentioned meditation. I'm also really big on visualization. So especially during cardio sessions where like I did a lot of lists this prep where things are a bit more mindless when you're just, trucking away on your cardio. I close my eyes. I visualize myself on stage. I visualize my hand being raised, and you kind of have to have that you do have to have that competitive mentality. And that's something that I've had when I was little. And I've kind of just grown up with that. And Jeff, I'm sure you can attest, if you want to be a great athlete, you have to be competitive. So I would visualize myself on stage, and then this is another like weird mental trick that I had. Bodybuilders are big on patterns. We love patterns. We love structure. We love, sameness. So the last 5 minutes of every single cardio session that I did throughout this prep, I had a certain song that I would play, and I had a certain mantra that I would repeat over and over in my head for the last 5 minutes of my cardio every single day. Put my headphones on, put my head up, like just tune everything out. And that kind of it helped to mentally center me again, if I had been having, a struggle bus lift. But in terms of things that push me and motivate me, I know you brought that up. Like I said before, kind of briefly in the beginning, I think that bikini is underrepresented in terms of, what we talk about. And I also think bikini gets a bad reputation. And I think that people view bikini competitors as little punks. Like, we're just, the ones that flit around and flitter and like, oh, I'm a bikini competitor. Yeah. But like, so part of my motivation and what gets me through is showing people and showing other women that females, even in the bikini division, are just as tough as men if you allow yourself to be. So I think there's a large stigma that, bikini girls, you shouldn't have to diet as hard, you shouldn't have to do XYZ, you're not to be taken as seriously, and I don't resonate with that. So part of my whole drive and purpose is showing people that that's not how this is, that's not how bikini is. And yeah, that's kind of how I stand in that. But then another big thing, this is my last big thing, I have so many big things, all the big things. But I kind of kept to myself more this prep. I didn't announce, what shows I was doing on social media. I kept that to myself. And I did that intentionally for psychological reasons. The prep that I had before that was a super stressful prep, I did announce what shows I was doing, and I made it known to people, I'm X weeks out of said competition, yada, yada, yada. And that prep did not go, according to, how you expect to look at 12 weeks out, 8 weeks out, 4 weeks out, etc. So having said on social media that I'm doing these shows, granted, I could have always pushed shows back, but when people would be like, oh, how many weeks out are you? I was like, I know they're not trying to insult me, but it would just irk me. Like, I'm like, I'm 8 weeks out, but I look like I'm 16, so just whatever.
Yeah.
I hope you're watching the video so you can see the facial expressions. So I decided this prep, I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep this to myself. And this was also just to reconnect with my own whys. I do feel like with the boom in bodybuilding, especially in the bikini division, there are a lot of people that compete for Instagram. And that's not me. That's never been me. So by keeping to myself and not saying, I'm X weeks out from this show, yada, yada, yada. I'm an introvert. I internalize things a lot. And so my motivations are largely internal. And I find more motivation by keeping to myself and connecting with myself than by sharing everything with everyone. So I think keeping that to myself a bit more helped me to, I guess, have a mentally more stable prep and just remember why I do what I do, as opposed to just blasting it on the internet.
Yeah, it seems like the theme overall is that you're cutting out all the extraneous external factors that could influence you. Like, you really just honed in on things that you needed to do and held true to the fact that you competed for yourself, and that's it. And then what you chose to share was just extra.
Right, exactly. I had to remind myself, and I still have to remind myself of this to this day, when I set out in fitness and in competing in bikini, my goal remains to be a professional athlete. My goal was never to be, a social media personality, and that's kind of happened as a side effect, and I love that, and I'm so grateful for that. But at the end of the day, my goal is to be a professional athlete, so I have to do what I have to do and, block out what I have to block out in order to make sure that I'm pursuing that goal optimally on all fronts, physically and mentally.
Yeah. And I think that reason, that why am I doing this? You have to be able to answer that truthfully for yourself. And just as an example of this, I was in almost exactly your position 2 years ago when I just wanted more than anything to be a natural pro. And so during that prep, I was very strongly motivated for my own reason. Like I really wanted to do this. I was doing it with Robin, and it was like had been a goal of mine since I was like 18 years old or something. Right. So when I achieved it, it was like ecstasy. Like I was extremely happy. And then a year later, I realized that there was a rule in the organization that you have to compete again in order to retain your pro card after 1 year. Mm-hmm. And so after having just like a 6-month, very short off season, I was essentially required to prep again, which was something I hadn't been aware of when I earned my pro card for whatever reason. And so I felt like I was kind of forced into this prep that I didn't really want to do. It was like almost like a technicality was forcing me to do it. And I will say that prep was so much more difficult emotionally, physically, probably as a result of it being more difficult emotionally than any other prep that I've done. And I think that really just resonates the fact that you have to be doing it for your own reasons. And if not, then you shouldn't even start it.
Absolutely. And that reason has to be there will always be people that question your motivations and question your reasonings. And, people will say, oh, that's not a good reason to do this. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if someone, loves your motivation. Your motivation has to come from yourself first and foremost, because nobody, as you both know, nobody's doing any work for you. So you have to be the one that puts your head on your pillow at night with your motivations and with your purpose, and be cool with that. Yeah. And, Instagram goes away after a while. Like, you have to, or people telling you that you have to do a show to maintain qualification. It has to come from inside you and nobody else.
Yeah. Well, damn, I feel like I want to compete again now.
I know,
You're so like lighting a fire under me.
I'm like taking notes like this entire time. Like, you listen to this like 50 times.
Yeah. But you do
compete again though, dude, because
I will. I'm looking at 2017, maybe 2018, but I'm thinking 2017 might be my year, because I'm starting to get that itch again. But one of the things that you said there that really hit home is that like you have to be proactive and purposeful, and you can't take the victim mentality in prep. Oh, God, and like you just have to be like, I'm choosing to do this because otherwise, everything that goes wrong, you just feel like, oh, why is this happening to me? Like, why am I doing this? And I feel like that really ties in with having your own purpose. Because if you're doing it for someone else's motives or someone else's reasons, then you feel like, oh, they're doing this to me, right? But if you're doing it to yourself, then it's like, well, this is just a sacrifice I'm making just to be true to my own goals and values.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody's holding you at gunpoint telling you to get up on stage in a bikini. Like, I hope not, at least. Otherwise, like, there's a lot more wrong with the world than I realize. But nobody's forcing you to do this. And I think that this is another reason why I'm glad that I've kind of pulled back from social media a little bit while still being present on it. But I think that it perpetuates the collective complaining mentality. People love to complain, and misery loves company. So just not partaking in that, like, it makes your shitty experience much less shitty if you don't harp on how shitty it is.
Yeah.
Like,
so true.
Yeah.
It's what you make of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And the people who do it for social media almost are forced into that victim type mentality sometimes, because it's like, well, you're doing it for social media, you're not doing it for your own values and reasons necessarily, right? So I think that finding a balance between like competing for your own reasons and then motivating people who want to see your progress is sometimes a difficult path to traverse, but I found probably psychologically some of the easiest preps I've done have been the ones where I didn't even have, like, Instagram didn't even exist, right? So, and I wasn't on Facebook, so I literally had no social media. I didn't post one progress photo. It was just me in my bathroom mirror by myself kind of thing. And
like, I see a new muscle today. Yeah.
And those were psychologically, I think, the golden days for me, because I didn't feel like I said, I felt like all of the outside factors were not really present anymore.
Absolutely.
But I think that you just presented a ton of really, really good ways to deal with it, with the fact that we do live in that society now, in that world. So you have to learn to sift through those, I guess.
Right. And one thing that I really like that Robin has said, just with regards to herself and being more of an introvert, if you don't want to deal with social media at a given time, you can turn it off. You can step away from it, but that's where you as the individual have to be attentive to your own mental state and realize, oh, maybe I need to stop spending so much time on social media because it's really weighing on me. And some people can't make that decision for themselves, but you have to be, attentive to that.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree. Yeah. So other than, so like most important thing is that you prep and you get ready for the show. So other than that, how can you set yourself up for success in the bikini division?
I think one big thing, and part of this is due to the fact that there is such a boom in the bikini division right now, is people don't want to take their time. So my biggest advice to people is grow your muscles. Bikini is still bodybuilding. And I use the analogy of, people that just jump into, wanting to cut and wanting to do a show. You go from being a baguette to looking like a breadstick. Like there's not really a whole lot different. Like you just end up looking like a smaller version of what you were. So if you truly want to be successful, you have to truly want to be successful and put forth the time and effort it takes to build, the muscular foundation. The stage is always going. Yes. So many people just see someone on the internet and they're like, oh, I want to look like that. I need to cut. Mm-hmm. That's not always the case. No. Even with bikini, even if you will have to get lean at some point. But if you don't have the muscular foundation to support the look that you need to have, you're going to set yourself up for failure. Like it's not going to be as rewarding as it could be. You only get one first show experience, and I mean, every prep, that's your experience, but the stage will always be there. So something that I talk about a lot, and I talk about this with my clients as well, is respecting your goals. So if you truly want something, you respect it. And that means for, bodybuilding, that you respect the fact that you may have to take a little bit more time before you can get on stage in order to either build the correct muscular foundation that you need for your given division or take more time to diet down. I dieted for 36 weeks. I mean, I knew I needed a minimum of 20 weeks, and that's a huge time commitment. So you have to be mentally ready as well. And then for bikini, I also think it's really important for people to educate themselves. I think part of why the bikini division gets such a bad rap and why there are so many horrible bikini experiences that people have is that girls just jump into it because they want to do it and they don't educate themselves on basics of training and nutrition and whatnot. And, they get taken advantage of by coaches and they get taken advantage of by people that are just in it for the money. Mm-hmm. So educate yourself on the basics. Spend time in the gym before you think about competing because prep is a whole other kit and caboodle.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. Like what I always tell people, or like people who ask me, like especially if are you going to compete again and everything, like first of all, I say I'll compete again when I feel ready. But also I say that like if your goal is to be fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to compete. So
exactly.
Like, you can,
oh my gosh.
You can just like, you can do your thing, like go to the gym, train for the sake of training and to better your physique before you even think about competing. And often I think that is the best route because like it said, huge. Like you said, you build that foundation ahead of time and can kind of learn the ins and outs before you jump into something that's like a huge commitment on top of just regular training.
Oh, most definitely. Because, prep does require 100% every day. And if you aren't okay with that, commitment, if you struggle to simply enjoy training without being in a prep, you're going to have a hard, rude awakening when you go to prep and when you face those times when you feel like crap. And then I also think this is another big thing, especially for women, is do not go into a competition prep with pre-existing body image or eating disorder or, any kind of that kind of behavior going into a prep. That's massive. That's huge. It's not, feeling bad about yourself is not going to be fixed by a prep. That's fixed by what's inside of you as a human being. And prep is not going to fix that. A lot of times prep just exacerbates that. There's body dysmorphia in bodybuilding, and that if you have any pre-existing issues with your food and tracking your food and anything like that, it's only going to be made worse by prep. And I think that's something that needs to be said more. And like you said, you don't have to compete to do fitness. There's plenty of people that do fitness and don't ever step on a stage. Like you haven't stepped on stage in a hot minute and you are a wonderful example to females in the fitness industry and males. And then look at, Katie Hearn. She's never stepped on a stage. She has never had the desire to. so she doesn't let that pressure force her to. And that's
I always
that's
use her as an
huge.
example. I was like, just look at how good she looks.
Right.
And look
Yeah.
at how successful she is.
I was about to
and
say, yeah, she looks
hasn't.
amazing and she does amazing. And, you know, people think that, I mean, yes, competing does help you from a marketing standpoint, giving you some efficacy in terms of being an athlete, but you can be a successful professional without ever stepping on a stage.
You just have
and,
to choose
yeah.
what drives you and what motivates you. And
Right. And that, yeah, that all goes back to your why. And then I guess in just terms of other things to be successful in bikini, just random, not as heavy of things, but attention to details. So things as small as the connectors on your suit. Like when I was transitioning from junior USAs to junior nationals, one of the pieces of feedback I received from a judge was change your suit connectors, change your bottom connectors, because I used to have one of the like 3-tiered
Danglies?
bottom
Yeah.
connectors. Yeah. And they were like, get a straight across one because it'll make your lines look longer. And I did. And my leg looked, I already have long legs, but it made my legs look like a million times longer. And then just, you know, the little things like hair and makeup and your posing. This goes across all divisions, not just bikini, but your posing is so, so important. And I can't stress that enough. Because it's not the body you have, it's the one you present that day. So if you haven't put time and effort into developing a strong stage presence and a strong routine, you will fade on stage, especially when you're in the larger classes at national shows where there's 30, 40, 50 girls in a class. Like, they won't even see you. So that's another big thing. And then to be successful, not just in bikini, but I guess in anything in life, your support system. So, you know, you and Jeff are a great support system for each other. I have a really supportive family. I have a really supportive coaching environment, my friend environment, all of that. So you need to have, it's going to be a lot. And Nick and I talked about this in one of the Q&As that we did on my channel, but you're going to have a much harder time if you feel like you're going it alone, because we are individuals, but we're not islands. You know, we can't get through anything that's difficult or anything that we want to pursue completely by ourselves. So you need to have a strong support system in place.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome, Emily. So just because we're limited on time in this one, we're going to take some viewer questions from Instagram right now.
Oh, for sure.
So if you guys have any questions that you'd like to hear answered on the podcast in future episodes, you can follow me on Instagram. It's just at jeffnippard, and also add me on Snapchat, jeffnippard. Those are usually where I'll take the questions from. So we're just going to answer 2 questions today. The first one comes from Healthy Blonde Fitness. She says, I feel like M. Dunk gets even more motivational and Wonder Woman-y when she's prepping. How do you keep a positive attitude and overcome your body's natural inclination to be crabby and sluggish?
I think, oh gosh, well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I have to think about this answer. Oh goodness.
Like bad moods,
try-
like are you ever like
Right.
hangry or like how, do you?
She gets hangry sometimes.
There,
Like if she intermittent fasts before her first training session for a little too long, especially if other people prolong it.
get home until 4 p.m.
Yeah, and it was like California time. So it was like 7 p.m. or something.
Yeah, so Ohio time, it was like 7 p.m. Yeah.
She just gets a little curt.
A little bit shorter. I'm not as bubbly as I
And
usually am.
glare eyes.
Right. But
That's
I
actually
think one big
exactly
thing with that, with mood, is you have to remember that, like kind of we talked about before, this is a personal decision. So if you're feeling crappy or beaten down or downtrodden or whatever, the people around you don't deserve the backlash from that, because you are making a personal decision. But so like you don't. So I just kind of get quiet when I feel that way, because I don't want to take it out on the people around me or the people that I love, because they don't deserve that. Is being like slightly masochistic the correct word for an athlete, like for a bodybuilding competitor,
I
like
think
putting
so,
yourself
yeah.
through some really bad stuff and finding motivation from that? Like I find motivation from struggle. I find motivation from not feeling 100%, because life is so easy. Obviously by default, when things feel great, life is easy. Life is wonderful. And I think one of my favorite things about bodybuilding is that I've been able to draw, or just lifting in general, is I've been able to draw a lot of parallels to life and a lot of analogies to life. When things don't feel great, you're doing something right. You know, whether you're prepping for a contest and you feel a little bit crappy because you're getting leaner, like you're getting a little bit better. When life is testing you, that's giving you an opportunity to make yourself a stronger person and a stronger individual, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of that. So I find motivation in that crappy feeling, because I know that it's teaching me something that I'm going to be able to use down the line. And just, I know that, any struggle reminds me of any struggle that I've had to deal with in the past. So, something that people don't know really about me that I've never really shared. Actually, I shared this with you, Robin, when you were actually helping me like write my bio. When I was 8 years old, I grew up in ballet. I grew up from the time I was like a year and a half to dance. And when I was 8 years old, my teacher told me that I would never be a professional dancer because of the way that my body looked. And so when I'm prepping and when I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show that is based on how I look, I remember that my body's now my celebration. Whereas someone in my youth told me that I couldn't do something, now it's become the thing. Now I can do it. Now my body is my power and my body's my celebration. So like I'm so motivated by that every single day. Even when I feel like crap, like my body is freaking awesome, and like no matter what anybody told me when I was little. And so it's just been like a big metaphorical like come around full circle. Like your body is amazing and it's capable of some pretty freaking awesome stuff. So just seeing that day to day is that motivates me, and I want to share that with people for sure.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah. One thing I'll just add on top really, really quickly that I used to do was I would remind myself every morning of 5 things, like people or just circumstances that I was grateful for.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like if you're embracing every day from a perspective of gratitude, it's like, okay, yeah, well, maybe I don't like get to eat for another hour or something, but like
right.
you still should be grateful for what you do have. And I find like when you frame everything that happens to you in that perspective, it really lessens those emotional reactions. Right. You know what I mean?
Right. When you realize you're able-bodied enough to even lift, you're like, okay, this is not that bad.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm not immune to those mood swings by any means, right. But these are strategies that can be implemented, and I've found that do help. But I don't think you can ever get to the point where you're like, no, I don't ever get moody or anything like that on prep. At least I've never been able to get to that point. So when it does happen, like forgive yourself, I guess, and try to do better next time, sort of thing.
Yeah. You have to acknowledge how you feel. Like you can't just hide from it, because then you just suppress it. But yeah, I think gratitude lists are an amazing way to kind of refocus your mind to being like, okay, this really is not as bad as I'm making it out to be. I have a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just like slightly interject and like answer a little bit of the rest of the question for this girl on behalf of Emily. I would assume that Emily becomes more motivational and Wonder Woman-y when she's prepping, because she's going through struggles and she's trying to communicate with everyone else and relate to everybody else on how she perseveres and how she gets through it. Like she's motivating herself by writing the post that she does.
Right. So definitely. Yeah. We don't just talk to talk. We talk to understand. We write and list. My friend Alyssa said this so much. We write to understand, even if that's just our own feelings. So being able to share that with someone who may be going through the same thing, that's just happening. It's kind of like a personal diary, like this is what I'm dealing with, and it just so happens to help someone.
That's awesome. Okay.
So I'm going to take one more really quick question, and then we'll wrap things up for now. But I really do want to keep this conversation going because I have so much more that I wanted to ask you. But we're just limited on time, so maybe in a couple weeks we'll come back and do it again. Yeah, stay tuned for part 2. So the last question we'll take comes from Aaron Iron Bars, and I won't read the whole thing, but it basically just says, how do you deal with not being satisfied? Like not feeling like, oh, I'm not ready, or constantly having that internal dialogue going,
Yeah. So in terms of lack of satisfaction, I definitely felt that after Junior USA's, for example, when I missed my pro card by like a place or two. And that was very, very hard for me to deal with. And kind of like I briefly mentioned with the last question, you have to acknowledge how you feel. You can't just try and say, oh, I don't feel this way. No, you have to acknowledge what you're feeling. So if you're not feeling satisfied with how you look, ask yourself why. And I think one big thing for me in terms of feeling satisfied, I'm very, very hard on myself, and I kind of have to pull back. And this sounds so cliche, but remembering where you came from and remembering what you have overcome already. I go look at my, the first time I ever competed, or I think about, the times in my life that have been really, really hard, like struggle bus times. And I remember that I'm so much stronger where I am now, you know, I don't think you'll ever be exactly where you want to be, but you have to find beauty in where you are. And you have to find peace in where you are and what you've come from. So I think as a competitor, you know, even if you don't win, even if you don't feel like you look as best you could, you've still done something amazing. You've still accomplished something. You've still put forth 100% into a goal that you gave yourself, or at least I hope you put 100% into it, and find satisfaction in that, because that in and of itself, it's hard to go after what you want. And so respect yourself, and, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. That's so cliche, but don't be so hard on yourself. Remember where you came from. Remember why you love what you do and why you deserve to be happy where you are, because we all do. We all deserve to be happy where we are.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I don't think I have anything to add, but I would just say that to tie in with what you said about giving it your 100%, like if you can honestly say to yourself, I hit my macros every day, I did everything I had to do, I gave it my all, then what happens, happens. Like at that point, you're just worrying about something you can't control. And if you can't honestly say, I gave it my all, and you're worrying about not being ready, then now is the time to change that. Like start giving it your all now and see what you can do. And then if you
put a plan in place for next time to do better.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Emily, there's so many good, informative, and motivational nuggets in there.
So good.
I'm like, gonna love
I'm gonna make a coffee table book.
Yeah, no,
I'll make a little coffee table book, and you guys can have the first copy.
Awesome. I was imagining like how we're gonna edit like maybe like a little video for it, and like picking out the most motivational points. I was like, oh, that would be a good clip.
Like
and
a
like
trailer.
overlaying with like Emily's physique pictures and like maybe little videos from stage and stuff. It'll be super motivational.
I really hope you overlay at the end with my sloth face.
Yeah.
Just have that at the end. That's my most motivational thing, is my sloth.
Definitely.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
All right, Emily. Well, thank you so much once again for the interview, and we are going to schedule another one, guys, so stay tuned for part 2. And just a quick reminder for all of you guys where you can find this podcast. You can subscribe to the audio versions on iTunes and Stitcher. If you are listening to this on iTunes, please go over there and give me a rating and a review. That's actually very helpful for me as a podcaster. So if you're liking this sort of content and you want to support us, the best way you can do that, go over to iTunes, give the podcast a rating, and write us a review. You can also find it on YouTube. So that's just on my personal fitness YouTube channel, youtube.com/jeffnippard. And you can find all of Emily's stuff and all of Robin's stuff in the show notes if you're listening on iTunes, and in the description box on YouTube. Strongly recommend going over and checking out Emily's YouTube channel. It's super motivational and informative, and the same thing for her Instagram. And Emily, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
And again, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure. I look forward to hopefully doing another one.
Sweet. We'll see you guys in the next episode.